very long way ahead, so it's amazing it's come around so quickly. I wanted to start by asking who has actually heard of Healthwatch? Oh, a few. Look, that's encouraging. I assume you're all registered with a GP, either here in Shropshire or perhaps across the border. Yeah? Who's been recently and had a really good experience? There was something about your appointment that made you think this was really good. A few of you, that's good. Who's been recently and thought, what an appalling experience, whether it was the appointment system, the waiting, the referral, onward referral process, that you actually felt frustrated by the whole thing? Or a few of you as well. And for the bulk of you, obviously, hopefully things are going all right. But those of you who have been recently, have you told anybody about your experiences? Especially if you felt it wasn't as good as it should have been. Somebody there has. Who did you tell? Right. But that's where it stopped. Because that's that's our strapline. Your voice counts. Have your health and social care in Shropshire. A lot of people say, well, what do you do? Well, we can't do anything unless you tell us what you think about your services. So I thought what I would do, and those of you who do know this about it, just bear with me. So I'll explain in a bit more detail about who we are, then what we do and how we're making a difference, and then where we're going next. When I wrote this initially, the outline, and was thinking about what to say, I didn't know what was going to happen post-March 2016. We had an initial 3-year contract, and we've now just had it confirmed until March 2018. So you actually feel there is point in doing things because we can take it forward. I don't know what the budget is next year, but we have got a future because although we were set up in 2012, 3 years is a very short time really to start making a difference, so I'm really delighted that we are able to move forward. So who we are. It's independent consumer champion. So saying your voice counts, we want to hear what you think of your services, but we are independent. We're funded, I'll come on to that in a bit, we're funded through the local council, but we're not funded through children's services or adult services. So we have that opportunity to use the feedback we receive to make that challenge, to act as your champion. But we've got a huge remit. We cover the whole of Shropshire, although we're based in Shrewsbury. We cover the whole of Shropshire, and we cover all ages, all demographies, all diseases, all care, health and social care that's publicly funded. So it's a really big remit. Healthwatch England was established first in October 2012, and so it acts as our network, and it leads and supports our local Healthwatch. And there are 148, one in each local authority. So the funding comes centrally from the Department of Health out to all the local authorities. Healthwatch England is funded separately, and it's a formal subcommittee of the CQC. It acts independently, but as I'll explain later, that link with the Care Quality Commission, CQC, is really important. We've all been set up to operate in the same way. We've all got the same powers, but we're all independent, and we're all independent in different ways. We're a company limited by guarantee. Healthwatch, Telford and Wrekin. We're part of a network of Healthwatch under part of Healthcare. They've now gone independent as Healthwatch Telford as a company. Staffordshire, which is another neighbouring Healthwatch we work with, they're part of an organisation called Engaging Community Staffordshire. So how the Act is interpreted has been done to meet that local need. So we are a charity, and we're a company limited by guarantee. But it's all about giving you that stronger voice, that opportunity to influence the health and social care services that you have locally. But we also have another, another function in that about information and signposting people, because it's certainly complicated. There are so many statutory bodies providing services, but there's a huge number of voluntary and community groups also providing services. So people might ring us and tell us about their recent experience, and then we can signpost them on to another local organisation, because it's amazing how many times people realise what they don't know once they've actually started talking about their experiences and sharing them. And a lot of people ring us because they don't want it to happen to somebody else. They don't really want to make a formal complaint, but they're really not happy with what happened to them. And so when we're having that conversation, quite often you find that you are signposting people so that nobody is sort of left high and dry when they telephone. So Healthwatch Shropshire said we're a company limited by guarantee. We are independent, but we're also open and transparent, so there's a huge amount of information on our website. We've got 8 board members at the moment, and we will be recruiting later this year. So if anybody's interested, please come and talk to me afterwards. It's always the biggest challenge to actually have a big enough board that we can really have that in-depth discussion. You don't have to be experts in health and social care and how the NHS works, but we need a range of expertise on the board and people who've got a passion for making changes happen. With 6 staff, we've had a bit of a hiatus recently as we've had a couple of people move on, but the new staff complement will be fully in place in November. There's myself, the secretary to the board, who also does support the volunteers. There's an admin officer who's part-time, an information officer who's also part-time, and you'll find out more about their roles in a minute. A community engagement officer who is out and about all the time across the county, and also our interim view officer, who's also full-time and leads on our patient experience work. But I'll explain in a bit more detail what they actually do. We also have volunteers, because there's only 6 of us and our remit is so huge, we couldn't deliver what we do without working with volunteers. And we have associate members, people who are interested in what we do, interested in what's happening in Shropshire, but don't actively want to go out and volunteer, but it's a way of finding out what's going on. So we're a member of the Health and Wellbeing Board, and that was something in the Health and Social Care Act. We're also a member of the new Adult Safeguarding Board. We sit on the Clinical Commissioning Board, but we're only observers. We don't have any voting powers, but we have the opportunity to represent people's views into the board discussions. So when they're talking about recommissioning a service, we actually have that opportunity at the meetings to influence the decisions. And we also have a seat on the new Primary Care Commissioning Group, and those are new powers that have just come into Shropshire from NHS England, so that we can commission primary care locally, so that the people who are commissioning now understand Shropshire, understand the needs of people locally. So what do we do? So we're the independent champion, and that's the key role. We need to engage with everybody across Shropshire, and I was pleased that a few of you had heard of us, but although we're 2.5 years old now, it is really, really difficult to raise awareness. We go on Radio Shropshire, we have things in the Shropshire Star, we put things in the local government newsletter, we try and put things in parish magazines, we come and talk to local groups, but there's always potential for people to not hear about us, and so we always ask people, well, how can we get in touch with you? And if you've any good ideas, we're always open to following them up. We're on social media, we Twitter, and we tweet on Twitter, and we have a Facebook page. Twitter we find much more useful, so if something's happening, Shropdop changed its telephone number last week, we tweeted that to try and get it out as far as possible. So that's our core function, is to engage with everybody who lives in Shropshire or uses Shropshire services, because of course we do have a border with Paris as well, and they use a lot of our hospital services. We use all that information to identify patterns and trends, because we're not individual caseworkers. If somebody wants to make a formal complaint, there are avenues defined avenues to follow, and we can support people to start making their complaints. If it's something immediate, we can refer you to the PAL service in each provider, and that patient advice and liaison service, and they will work with you in detail on an individual issue. What we do is use all the feedback to identify the trends and patterns. And then once we've identified, an issue, we will use that information to challenge and try and influence change. So we work with a whole range of people who commission and provide services. But it's not all negative. We're also interested in what works well. That's why I started by asking if you have a good experience recently. Every GP practice is very individual, but you find that on a hospital ward, something will work really well on one ward, but another ward in the same trust doesn't work in the same way. Our community hospitals, although they're all part of the community trust, they work differently in many ways. So we are keen to hear what works well, and we share good practice. And then, as I say, we signpost. And as it's become much more complicated, I think our number of queries we get for signposting are increasing. And then, although we were given that statutory remit, we're not a statutory body, but we have statutory powers, we developed our own mission statement. So we are aiming to be the recognised independent voice of the people of Shropshire, seeking to improve their experiences of health and social care. A lot of you will have patient participation groups in your GP practice, which is another way of actually sharing experiences, because nobody can do anything unless we know what worked well or what went wrong. But we actually have the statutory power, so if we make a report, because we've had a number of comments on a particular issue, the provider has to respond to us and tell us what they've done. If they're not going to do anything, they need to tell us why not, and if we're not happy, we can escalate that response further to try and get a resolution. So we do have power. So as I say, we started 2.5 years ago in April 2012. We made a very early decision that we would have revolution and start from scratch, because there was a predecessor organisation, but we felt it was really important that we started Healthwatch as we meant to continue. But it wasn't really a blank page. There was the tender document, there was the contract, there was Healthwatch England and the statutory powers that we've got. There was a lot of guidance from Healthwatch England and the local government association about how Healthwatch should be working, how they can use their powers to best effect. Because we're a company, we've got to tick all the boxes the companies have. Similarly for the Charity Commission. So we had to take all that into account, and that influences the way we do our annual report as well. But I think the biggest challenge that we were facing was local expectations. There had been some public consultation and engagement before we were set up, and how are we going to make a difference? That was the really big question. So we had all those other things going on, but actually we needed to work to meet the needs of the people of Shropshire. And it's very interesting, a lot of Healthwatch take a very informal approach to their annual report. We felt we needed to have that legal document because we were a charity and a company limited by guarantee. You can see it on the website, and it's really not very user friendly. So we've got our annual event on the 10th of November in the afternoon, where we will be presenting this year's annual review, which is a much more user friendly document, telling everybody about what we've been doing and what's going to happen next. And the theme for the annual event is Everybody Matters. I'm sure you've heard on the news about parity of esteem. If you've got mental health problems, are you really having your physical health problems met? If you present in A&E with physical problems, do people really take into account that you've got some mental health problems? And so we are going to have an event in the afternoon called Everybody Matters, with some key leaders from the local health bodies and social care actually talking about what they do and how they approach looking after some of the most vulnerable in our community. And those are going to be short presentations, no PowerPoint, and the people in the audience then have the opportunity to ask the questions like in any questions on the radio. And it worked well last year, so we're hoping the format works this year. And what comes out of it we will use to then inform our forward work programme. So that's the 10th of November if anyone would like to come, and it is in Shrewsbury. So before I go into the detail of exactly what we do, the acting locally is the really important bit. We are here to act on your behalf when you tell us about your experiences. We work very closely with Telford and Wrekin because I'm sure you're aware that the providers like the Acute Trust, Princess Royal Hospital and Royal Shrewsbury Hospital belong to the same trust. The Community Trust works in both areas. The Mental Health Trust works in both areas. Sexual health services are provided by the same trust in both areas. It's really only the council services that are provided differently. So it's really important that we work with Telford and Wrekin. It's also important that Welsh people in particular, but other people from outside the county, if they use our services, have that opportunity to make their voice heard. So we work with other Healthwatch, and we also work with the Community Health Council in Paris. We have our own priorities, as does Telford and Wrekin, but I think we do work together, and particularly on interim view, where we can visit establishments providing care. We work in a very similar way. And there are big projects like the Urgent Care project that's going on at the moment, the Future Fit project, where we're all working together, because it's not fair on a provider to do one thing in Shrewsbury and something else in Telford. We've really got to work together on some of these big issues. So listening to people's experiences, it's about gathering the evidence. We're independent and we've got to be intelligence-led. And we're not talking about randomised controlled trials, huge numbers of comments and take people's experience, but it's how we collect them that's really important and how we use that data. The number of comments we're getting every month is going up all the time. We're out and about, all of us in different ways across the country. We work with the patient groups, we hear individual stories, we work with the voluntary sector so that they can work with us and provide information as well. There are specialist groups who work very closely with Mind. Power is it's a national body, but they've got a contracting structure to support people locally who want to make a complaint. But if they have feedback and people don't want to go on to making a complaint, we work very closely together and share that feedback, because it would be awful if somebody rang Power and said, I need some help in making a complaint. After the conversation, decide they're not going to go ahead, and all that information would be lost then. So by sharing information, and we all have information sharing agreements, it's all anonymous and it's confidential, we use that information. We also engage with people when there's consultations going on. If the CCG is holding some engagement events or consultation events, we try and be there because we are independent, because sometimes people just don't want to share their experiences with the organisation providing the services. So we gather our information from all over. But interim view is a really, really important function, and as I say, we've got a full-time officer who deals with this. She listens to all the complaints, the comments that are coming in, all the feedback, but by running the interim view programme, what she's actually doing is giving Healthwatch the opportunity to go out and see and hear for ourselves how care is provided. So we can visit care homes, day centres, hospital wards, community hospitals, A&E, GP practices, dentists, opticians. I mean, it's huge. We could do, all 6 of us could do interim view and nothing else. And even working with the volunteers, we couldn't go out to as many places as we wanted to. But we visit. We don't inspect. We visit. We visit from what we call the lay perspective. So when I do an interim view, if I go into a hospital ward, I think, would I be happy for my husband or my mother to be in this ward? So we're looking at it from that person-centred approach. We can only go to services that are funded by the public purse, but if we did have comments about a care home, say, where they didn't have public funding, so there's nobody funded by the council or the NHS, we would make sure the Care Quality Commission knew about that feedback. We can't actually visit, but we would make sure that it didn't just end there. But what's very different from earlier visits that our predecessor organisations undertook was that we have got to have a clear purpose. I can't think, well, Monday today, got some volunteers and nothing to do. Where would they like to go this afternoon? It's very much about having that purpose. The volunteers who do enter and view are called authorised representatives. So that's where all the feedback comes in. We've listened to what people have told us, whether it comes by email, from a meeting, from individual comments, telephone call, and we use that to build up a picture. So we will go and do a visit where it might be that there's something really good happening, but I have to say so far it's been where there have been concerns raised. And we use that feedback though to decide what is the purpose of our visit. If we've had a lot of comments about the quality of the food in the care home, we might choose to go at lunchtime with the purpose of seeing how meals are provided, where they're provided, what's the quality of the food. But we've talked to the people who are resident there, we've talked to the patients in the hospital wards. It's about hearing what they think of the care they're receiving. And that's why it's different to people talking to PALS. Some people won't go and talk to the PALS service in the hospital because they're so worried there might be repercussions on their care while they're still in hospital. But as I say, we can take comments anonymously and we treat them confidentially. So it's a really important function for us because we can go out and see for ourselves what's happening. We can go in unannounced, so if we were really concerned about something, we might choose to not tell the provider that we're going and just turn up. And that would be our authorised representative, but also a member of staff. But more usually we do an announced visit where they have 2 weeks notice that we're going. And I know a lot of people think that they'll have planned for your visit, but an experienced visitor will be able to tell if an act has been put on them. If you're there for 3 hours, there might be a bit of an act initially, but people can't keep it up for that length of time. But it also gives us an opportunity to talk to members of the family, carers. Other people can come and talk to us when the visit is on, so they're opposed to that and we advertise when we're going. So it's a way of really hearing as widely as possible about the care. If we have some really serious concerns raised, we would refer those to safeguarding. It may be more appropriate for the adult safeguarding team to follow up and for us to go in. Because we're not inspecting, we don't look at paper records or anything like that. We don't look at clinical care plans. We're very much going in from that lay perspective. But we also work with the Care Quality Commission as well as the Council and the CCG. So if we want to go in somewhere, we will make sure everybody else knows, and we will get some other feedback as well to make sure we get the most out of our visit. And then all the reports are published. You can look on our website and you'll see what we found on the different visits. Putting together all that feedback with Enter and View, it helps us understand what's happening across the county. And we use that information for the rest of our work. But it's really important that we do it properly, that we record what people tell us properly, that we are rigorous in our approach. When we first started, we went to a meeting and it was a sort of workshop with everybody who's providing care locally. And one of the case studies was a front page in the Shropshire Star about a learning disability facility. And a whistleblower had raised concerns, and one of the comments was, and Healthwatch was in 3 weeks ago. And that's really why we've got to do what we do properly, because we may need to defend our position. But what you see is what you see at that point in time. So if we've gone in to look at meal times, our report will be focused on that, and it might be totally different to what somebody else is concerned about. But if other issues were raised while we were there, we make sure we record those and we feed them back to the provider. So how we use the comments is really important. And we share them with the provider's service. So Enter and View, the report goes directly back to the provider for their response and an action plan. If we've identified a trend or a hotspot, we'll talk to the provider and share the comments, or we might go to the clinical commissioning group, the CCG, who are buying the service and raise our concerns. that I couldn't really make up my mind what presentation of the comments to give you, but I thought I'll give you all of last year, and we know we've got more comments this year. We go through them regularly as they come in, but every quarter we look at what we call the Intelligence Committee, and we really look at the comments we receive in much more detail. So that's for the whole of 2014. So when we first started, we've been going a year. And so the number of comments varies quite a lot over the quarters, but you can see negative are far greater than the positive, and I think they're about 4 times the number now as we're going forward. A lot of comments are mixed, and some people just want to tell us about their experience. There's nothing in particular, but it's still valuable feedback, because we can look and see over each quarter and then over the year if we've got a lot on a particular GP practice or a particular care home, so we can build up that picture of what's going on. And from last year, these were the main themes: quality of treatment, waiting times, self-attitude, access to a service, and access to information. And those 5 regularly come up. Access to information and how people are communicated with runs right the way through everything from GP appointment right the way through to inpatient appointments, outpatient appointments. It's a really fundamental issue. Access to a service, some of it's about physical access, some of it's about what you have locally, and so there's a lot of variation within the comments, but those are the sort of top themes, and they really haven't changed very much this year. Waiting times, I'm sure everybody's aware of that. It's a really big issue. Quality treatment covers a very wide range, and that's part of the problem. We could have comments on discharge, but it could be from every single specialty in the hospital. So although you could say we have 20 comments in a month, it can be very difficult to pick out exactly what the issues are. Is it a common thread across all the different departments, or is there something specific in some departments? So we publish a You Said We Did, and that comes out every 6 months now, and the one to the end of September is coming out shortly. And we also do a newsletter where we try and pick up some of the things that are going on in the county. And You Said We Did, very fortunately it doesn't say you said we did and this happened, because that's actually really difficult to do. And at the end of the day, that's what we do want to achieve. You tell us something, this is what we're doing about it, and this has happened at the end. One example from last year was the dentists. We had a lot of comments about a lack of NHS dentists. So we worked with NHS England, and we've got 2 more NHS dentists for Shropshire. 2 doesn't sound very many, but it's better than nothing. But very often it's difficult to actually find out what happens with the comments, because we don't make the changes. We ask for that response, and now, sort of 2 years on, what we're trying to do is follow up and make sure that where we have made recommendations in enter and view report, or as a result of comments, that things are happening. In ophthalmology, we had a lot of comments last year about a whole range of issues, but particularly around appointments and the way the outpatients work. So we did an unannounced interim view into the clinic. And it's absolutely fascinating when people aren't expecting you as to how you're in time around the booking and scheduling. I don't know how many people have had outpatient appointments recently and had 2 letters. Yeah. You get a letter from the referral appointment service confirming what you've agreed on the phone, then you get another letter from the hospital. In some cases, that appointment is cancelled and you have a cancellation letter before you've even had your confirmation letter. And sometimes it's cancelled twice before you actually get your appointment, and then you can't go. But it's 3 strikes and you're off and have to go back to your GP. But actually, the first 2 were not your fault. So we've raised that, and I'm pleased to say that there is now a piece of work going on to look at booking and scheduling and to see how it can be simplified and people can have more confidence. If you're on holiday and your appointment letter comes through at really short notice, it's not your fault that you can't go. because you haven't been part of the negotiations to arrange the appointment. So there are all sorts of things, and you think now with computers it should be much, much easier. And when you have an outpatient appointment, if you need another one, why can't you arrange it when you're there? So by people telling us what their issues are, we can use those, and then you influence change. So I hope eventually it'll be a much more streamlined service, but it all takes time. So you said we did is actually very difficult to do, even when we know things are happening. The other thing that we got very involved in last year was the walk-in centre. Who used Monkmore as a walk-in centre? Oh, quite a few of you. Who's been to A&E since the walk-in centre is there? Oh, few of you. Did you find it confusing at the hospital side? No? Oh, well, that's quite good to hear, because we've done dementia review visits there recently, because when they said they were moving the walk-in centre, we said it should still be called the walk-in centre if that's what you're moving. And in due course, when the NHS Future Fit programme that they're looking forward, when they actually know what an urgent care centre should be, that's when you change the name. But at least we won the battle, if not the war, because it does say urgent care centre, walk-in centre on the sign. But it's taken a long time to actually get that in place, and then a lot of people still find it very confusing when they go, because they feel they're going to A&E and they're being treated as if they're going to A&E, whereas actually they wanted to see a GP in the walk-in centre. So that's how we're using the comments, and at the end of the day we're trying to make a difference for people locally. So I said we information and signpost, and we do contribute to the CQC inspection. So there was an inspection, I think 2 weeks ago now, in the Robert Jones and Admin Central Orthopaedic Hospital. We sent all the comments we'd had to the CQC to help them decide what they needed to look at during the inspection. But we also supported their listening events, where local people can actually go and meet the inspectors and tell them about what they think of their providers. So we do work closely there. We also work with the Health and Wellbeing Board, and although I'm there in my own right, I take with me all our intelligence, so that when there's a discussion about dementia services, I can contribute to that debate about what people locally think about the services. So again, we're trying to influence the way forward. We work with scrutiny, and we're very unusual as a Healthwatch. We've got a memorandum of understanding between the Health and Wellbeing Board, Healthwatch and Scrutiny, to make sure that we're all working together but not treading on people's toes and duplicating. So if Scrutiny wants to look at something in 3 months' time, that's very useful for us to know, because we might go out and collect some comments, or we might do a visit, but we will make sure we contribute to that, and we will either work with them or contribute like that, rather than do a similar piece of work. We can do themed projects, and we can do commissioned pieces of work. Our first themed project was to look at A&E last year, not at how A&E works, but why are people going to A&E when they could go to the pharmacy, they could go to the minor injury unit, weekend they could bring dropped off. And we published a report, which is that's the A&E report that we did, and we talked to people in the waiting room, not making any judgment about why they'd gone, but were they aware that they could have gone to a minor injury unit. So if you live in Craven Arms, why are you travelling all the way to Shrewsbury with something that could have been done in a minor injury unit in Ludlow, which is 7 miles away? And so it's been useful in raising awareness of other services. You can use your pharmacy, you can use Shropshire, you can dial NHS 111, which is really important in the winter as sort of there's more illness in the community. So that was the first piece of commission work we did, and we're doing a project at the moment around dementia services, and it's being commissioned by Public Health, because we actually have a dementia action plan in Shropshire, but it's coming to the end of its life. It was very complicated, so we were asked if we would do a short piece of work where we will go out and talk to people who are actually using the services, talk to people who are the carers, we'll talk to GPs and their practices, we'll talk to the other providers, and at the end of it we will have some key points of what's working well, what isn't working so well, where are the gaps, what do we want to do next to refresh the action plan. And it's because we're such a small team, we've had to bring in some additional support to actually do that piece of work. So again, the report will be properly published at the end. And so that's the range of publications that we do, and they're all on the website. We're about to publish a report about access to GP appointments, and we worked with Healthwatchers in Telford and Wrekin, Stoke-on-Trent and Staffordshire, and we've all done our own, used the same questionnaire in our local practices. We did 5 practices in Shropshire, 10%, just over 10% of the number we've got, and they did exactly the same in the other Healthwatchers, because one of the things you hear all the time, can't get an appointment at my GP practice. So that will be published and we'll have a press release, so hopefully it'll come out just in time for the winter. So that's the ICS report was the first commission piece of work we did, and that was looking at the supported discharge, that when people are in hospital, once they're medically fit to be discharged, then people are now assessed fully once they're at home, and they have 6 weeks intensive support in the hope that they won't be readmitted and they won't need a care package. And so that was quite an interesting piece of work, because that was on the initial prototype, and it's now being rolled out right across the county and will eventually go into all the wards in the hospital. I'm nearly at the end, you'll be pleased to hear. This is our research grant, and this is something that we've been very lucky to have. It's not a huge amount of money. It's 12,000 each year, but it's another way for us to hear what people think of the services they get and the problems they face accessing those services. Because we have a call for proposals around the theme. So this year's call, and we're going to finalise approve the project at the beginning of November. This year's call was about quality of treatment and access, reflecting the comments that we've had in. And so it's a way for a community group to actually work with its users to think about what their challenges are in terms of access. So we have got a clear responsibility to listen to everybody, and there are some groups where it's much harder to engage and to hear what they think about services. It's perhaps they don't want to share their experiences, or they're just much harder to get in touch with. And so the research grant is a way of working with those local community groups and actually finding out more about what happens in those communities. And those are 2 of the reports in the first year. Autonomy looked at adults with high-level functioning autism and Asperger's, and SANS was about safer ageing, no discrimination, about people who are older now, perhaps going into care, who've never come out as being gay or they're transsexual, and the problems they are facing because they grew up in a very different world. But I think what's interesting for us, what you learn about one particular group, are there principles there that could apply to other groups that are seldom heard? So when people go into hospitals, you have learning disabilities, you've got a passport. But if you're suffering and living with dementia, you also have a passport. Well, does a hospital need lots of different passports? Perhaps they should have one passport for people who are especially vulnerable and can't communicate their needs properly. So that it's about identifying some common principles and how can we use these in other areas, and making sure that people who commission and provide the services are aware of what's being found out. So what are we doing next? So the GP access report is about to be published, so we've actually looked at out of hours as well in GP practices. I was quite surprised that because I work, I would ring my GP practice at lunchtime. It's amazing how many practices, I know they won't see patients, but their administration and reception is closed as well, and you get an answer phone at lunchtime. And it's really frustrating. So we've done a piece of work around that, which we will report on. We've also been looking at the implementation of the maternity services review, so we've just done interim review visits to all the midwife-led units in the community hospitals and in Shrewsbury Hospital, so that will be published shortly. We're very keen to follow up on the CQC inspection at the Royal Shrewsbury and Royal Hospitals, which took place a year ago. They had their response from the CQC, did the immediate action, and we feel we've got a responsibility to make sure some of the other things don't just get lost and fall through the gaps, but those recommendations are followed up. And I'd say the walk-in centre is there. Future Fit, I'm sure, did everyone see the press coverage the other week about the reconfiguration of the hospitals and that no decision has yet been made? Yeah. So the patient group and Healthwatch, we've all had an opportunity to be involved right the way through the programme to make sure, again, people's voices are heard. And we're obviously representing the people of Shropshire, and I've had board members who are on the programme board and the different work streams. We're trying to influence the engagement and get some more continuous engagement going on. And I think we did a press release on the back of it, because although it's really disappointing, there is one huge opportunity that they deferred the decision on the reconfiguration of the hospital. But really, you can't take care out of the acute hospital until you've got community services in place. So that piece of work that started earlier this year on the community side, and what can you expect in your community, not just GP practice, but in minor injury unit and the community hospital, or even sort of through other facilities, that needs to happen so that if they're going to have few admissions in Shrewsbury, you can be confident that you will be treated locally. And that piece of work was running behind the acute hospital work. So there is an opportunity now to bring it together, and dementia care I'll talk to you about. So that's my main message. Your voice counts. So please, let us have your experiences. We do have a leaflet called Tell Us, and we are now trying to stimulate more comments by having a hot topic. I have got some of these if anyone wants to take them away. This month our hot topic is living with diabetes. I'm sure you've all heard in the press about the obesity epidemic and the almost exponential rise of people being diagnosed with diabetes. We'd like to know what people think of the services they're getting at the moment, including the prevention services. Because once you're in the system, you're getting the information. But if you think you're well, you might not necessarily be aware of your risk of diabetes or what you can do to minimize it. So every month we're going to have a hot topic. So in the new year we thought we would do one on social care, because we are, although we're Healthwatch, we are Health and Social Care Watch, if you like, but people latch on to the health, so we have far fewer comments on social care. So by having a monthly topic, we're trying, you can still comment on anything else, but we're trying to bring in a greater number of comments on an area where perhaps we haven't got many, like social care, or where there's something going on locally that we think we should be more aware of and what people think. So if the incidence of diabetes is going to go on increasing, we need to know what people think of the services now so that they can plan for the future and respond, especially where there are gaps. So I have got some leaflets, I've also got a few pens, and I've also got some associate membership forms if anyone might become a member. So thank you very much. And I'm happy to take questions if anyone would like to ask. It is.
Could you repeat the question, please?
It's about the integration of health and social care. It is progressing, and there's an initiative called the Better Care Fund, which meets regularly, and it's got a number of projects under it. The supported discharge project is a real flagship project under that. And I feel really strongly about it. If you need an occupational therapist, you don't care who pays for it. You need an occupational therapist in the right place and at the right time. So actually, integration, I think, is fundamental to the way forward. So it is happening, but it is slow. But the Health and Wellbeing Board, it's out there at the moment. If anyone's online, you can search for it. The Health and Wellbeing Strategy for Shropshire is out for consultation. And it's taking a different approach now. It was done I suppose, 3 years ago, and there were some very, very specific priorities. The new one is much more generic. It's about living well and keeping well. Then if you are ill, how are you supported? And so it's making it clear it's across the whole spectrum of care, and it will be a driver to getting people to work together as well. But there are going to be 3 exemplar projects, one for carers, one on mental health, and one on obesity and diabetes. So our hot topics will feed into that. And the idea of having the exemplars is to try and work through how services can be delivered better in those areas. And it comes back to how people feedback on the service, because as care becomes more integrated as well, it'll be more difficult for people to know who to go to if they want to raise issues, which is why we're very keen to raise our profile, because we can take those comments and we can go back to the different providers. I don't know if that reassures you. It is happening.
How far have you been engaged in keeping open the A and B units in both Shrewsbury and Shropshire? Because I find, talking to people, they are very concerned about getting to A&E if they are seriously ill. And I know it's also a concern for the ambulance services.
We have, and that's the NHS Future Fit project, where we've had board members in each of the work streams. The proposal to have one emergency centre will cater for the 20% of people who currently go to A&E who need that really emergency response within an hour. 80% of the A&E attendances are less emergency, they're urgent. You need to be seen within 24 hours. And what is A&E now will be relabelled as the urgent care centre, and it will take 80% of what's happening in A&E. So you won't lose A&E. 80% of what is provided currently will still be provided in Shrewsbury and in the rural urgent care centres. The 20% who are that emergency, the sort of the top of the pyramid, that's where the discussion is happening about this one emergency centre. So whatever happens, wherever the emergency centre ends up, 80% of what you go to A&E for will still be seen and treated in Shrewsbury. It will still be there. They are not proposing to take away the A&E function.
Because the people also in Power
use it, yes.
Because if we are going to have the A&E in Telford, for example, the journey time from getting from Wales right the way through.
But A&E, there won't be A&E as you know it now. There will be 2 urgent care centres in Shrewsbury and Telford who will continue to do 80% of what A&E does. The decision is about that 20% at the top who are the emergency and where that centre will be. And there are other repercussions on that. And so we've inputted very strongly about the geography, the access, the minimising the risk. And at the end of the day, the whole Future Fit programme is about improving quality, improving safety, improving outcomes, and minimising the risk. So I personally have some very strong views about where it should be. And as an organisation representing the views of the people of Shropshire, we have fed into that programme about better outcomes for Shropshire. But you won't lose A&E as such. You will have an urgent care centre.
I don't think the publicity that's gone out has made that particularly clear.
No.
Because I wasn't aware of that.
No.
It was A&E in either Telford or Shrewsbury.
People, and it makes headlines though, doesn't it? And it sells papers if they say when Telford or Shrewsbury will lose their A&E. A&Es won't exist in the new world, but that's what sells the papers. So I agree with you. You can have a look at the NHS Future Fit website, which is, if you search for NHS Future Fit, you will find it, and it gives you sort of a lot of information about it. And we've actually said that if they didn't make the decision on the location of that one emergency centre, at the beginning of the month, we said although a consultation is further away, they've got to do some continuous engagement now. They've got to get out into all the communities in Shropshire and reassure people and tell them exactly what is happening and what's going on. But that's where the opportunity is, that if the decision is deferred for what's going to happen on the emergency centre and the diagnostic and treatment centre, we can have those discussions about what should be provided locally in the community, so people at the end of the day will have less distance to travel. So if it's an urgent care centre in Shrewsbury and an urgent care centre in Ludlow, and you live in Craven Arms, you can go to Ludlow. You don't actually have to go all the way to Shrewsbury.
Why can't they keep it as accident and emergency? I mean, accident and emergency, is that what it means?
We've said that. That's come from the Department of Health, that in the brave new world there will be emergency centres and urgent care centres. Pardon?
What are they classing as the 20%?
I'm not a clinician, but my understanding, the 20% that will go to the emergency centre are where you need treatment within the hour. It's an emergency, whereas urgent care centres are urgent. You need something within 24 hours. Any more questions? Yes? The meeting on the 10th of November is at 1:30 and it's going to be at the Beaten Track. That's a departure for us. It's a pub by the cinema. But our first annual event, we got criticised for not having biscuits with coffee. So we had plenty of biscuits last year. Last year we were in a community centre and we had, although there was a lot of parking, there wasn't enough, and we had a lot of grief about the parking from the people who came, but also the residents locally. So this year we're going to the Beaten Track because we can have biscuits and there is masses of parking. Well, that will be the clinical decision.
Will it just be a telephone operation?
No, if you dial 999, it's a clinical decision, and you would go to this new emergency centre in the same way you go to A&E now. If you go to Stropdock or your GP and they decide it's an emergency, and the emergency centre is only by ambulance, so it is a clinical decision.
Well, thank you very much, Jane. It's great to know that you're independent, that you're on the side of the patient. There are times when we feel that because we're not paying directly for our medical care, we can't really complain or find fault. So it's empowering to know that you are there to talk to, and you've got the power to influence decisions in the future. And it's great to hear that you do go and visit in care homes. We've all heard harrowing tales of lack of care in these care homes, and especially since we are probably the next cohort. We're particularly interested. Thank you very much.